Welcome to the AfterWord.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for thanking me. I am Eric. I'm joined by Vince, Kirsten, and Betty. We do this podcast to look at the passage just preached.
From the loft.
Okay. You got it in there. There's always layers, more application, more questions to ask. And we want to see the God's glory in it as well. But before we get to the passage and wrapping up the book of Ruth, I want to ask this question. It's been really nice outside the last few days. We see different evidences of spring. For you, what is like the biggest evidence of spring? Is it birds, warm weather, flowers?
Yes.
Thanks for giving us some options.
I'm just trying to be helpful.
All of the above, but I think it's especially in the morning when you like open the door to let the dog out and you hear the birds singing. Because even in the morning, it's like still in the 20s. It's not warm in the morning, but you hear the birds and you're just like, all right, it's spring now.
So nice.
And then Uzziah came in playing soccer in the backyard yesterday to show me that he found a blade of green grass. He plucked it, but he found
no longer have a blade of green grass.
We did have one blade of green grass. So he was really excited about that.
All right, so it's birds for Kirsten. Vince, Betty?
I feel like it's warm weather. Whenever I can comfortably wear shorts, that's when it feels like spring, and we've gotten there.
Yeah, my white leg saw the sun for the first time in a long time a couple of days ago. Would you please talk, Vince? Let's move past my legs.
But was it shorts or was it the pirate pants? Like when you wear the Eric culottes.
I have 2 pants of those now.
2 pants of them?
Well, I did it with my little corduroys. I rolled those bad boys up.
Oh boy.
Got hot.
So do you have like distinct pants? You're like, these are good rolling pants.
Yeah, because there's 2 reasons why. 1, they roll really well, and 2, they're too short otherwise. So it's really practical.
So you only wear them as rolling pants, not
Mostly,
regular
yes.
pants.
What if you cut them off and didn't roll them?
I don't think I want to do that.
Why?
I cut off some other jeans last year for jean shorts, and I'll wear them. But it seems like these shorts are too good for that. Yeah.
How short?
What's a good evidence of spring for you, Vince?
Being on the trails running, and it's not packed with snow and ice.
And you can't see the animal footprints.
Yeah, you can't see what's going to eat you.
You know they're there now, but you don't see that they're near.
Yeah,
that's one of them. Longer daylight. Time changes this weekend.
Really?
Yeah.
Spring forward, so we lose?
No, we don't.
Yes, we lose an
we
hour.
do not.
Yeah,
we fight about this every year
don't.
We lose an hour of
literally
sleep.
lose an hour.
How? Go to bed an hour earlier.
It doesn't work that way.
No, if it goes from 2 to 4.
No, 2 to 3. You just missed from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
When it should be 2 o'clock, it's actually 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and you stay up to wait on that, or?
No, but
You lose it.
You don't get to sleep during that hour.
Whoever disagrees with Vince, email him at Vince at the
Or who agrees with Kirsten, because he and I argue about this every year.
I'm not disagreeing with the specifics of the realities. I'm just saying, at 2 a.m, are you actually laying there thinking, oh man, I just lost that hour?
I might be if I'm awake. I'd be laying there thinking about how tired I'm going to be in the morning.
When I wake up, I'm definitely thinking it.
Yeah.
Wake up an hour later.
It's a Sunday morning. Can't do that.
Sure you can. Everybody else does.
Vince, Kirsten, I'm with you. It's the birds.
Thank you.
It's also the flowers. I've got little crocuses, or crocusi, where the plural is. Croci blooming in my front yard, and is gorgeous.
My favorite are the lilacs. When you walk past and you just can like sniff it in the air.
Spring is almost here. Vince, Ruth chapter 4.
I was like, wait, what? Did you say, Betty? Oh, yeah, shorts. That's what got to Eric's white legs.
Yes.
All right. Ruth 4. We'll finish it out. Boaz is coming back from the threshing floor. He stops at the gate. The gate was the entryway and exit in and out of the city, often a congregating spot for people, and also a spot for legal matters to take place. So decisions were made at the gate. It was a collective place to meet. So he stops there in hopes that this other redeemer will come through, this other relative who's closer, who should take on the role. He stops to wait on that. He does happen to come by, and so Boaz gathers the leaders around and says, hey, here's the deal. You're the next in line. Would you take on the land that Naomi is trying to get back? As a redeemer, he agrees to it, and then Boaz adds on, and you also have to take on Ruth as your wife, to which the guy says, no thanks. So Boaz, they go through the whole ceremony of the sandal and the giving and taking of the sandal that just shows, it was a way for them to show this agreement's been made. We've got witnesses. Boaz takes on the role and responsibility of redeemer, marries Ruth. The story fast forwards 9 months. They have a son. They name the son Obed, and Naomi becomes the nurse to the nanny to Obed, their son. And the book ends with a genealogy from Perez up through and past Boaz and Ruth's son Obed through David. So it leaves us hanging on this, the very last word of the book is David. I want to point out something interesting, or at least I found it interesting when I first started studying. The first words of the book, in the very first verses, talk about Elimelech. And there's this man who is named Elimelech, which means my God is king. And the very last word of the book is David, who will be king. So there you go.
Like that.
Yeah, there you go.
So looking back in the book, you pointed out yesterday, the land is redeemed, Ruth is redeemed, Naomi is redeemed, and then through King David, we are redeemed. So redemption.
Yeah.
I think for the discussion today, what I'd like to do is share some responses that people have emailed in that God used this book to speak to them. Read through some of those, maybe interact over some of that, and then after that, talk personally. What are some big takeaways we had from this book as we look back over it? So instead of our listener listening to me do a bunch of reading, I'm actually going to pass around my computer around the circle, and we're going to take turns reading. Betty, I'm going to have you actually go first, and it's these 2 paragraphs.
Okay. The book of Ruth has always been a favorite, but just another Old Testament story in the midst of Old Testament books. But in this series, the story came to life with the characters, learning about their names and their emotional struggles. Real life as we witness it today, grief, despair, anxiety caught between the series of deaths, famine, and displacement or moves. Seeing the faithfulness of Ruth to Naomi, of Boaz to Ruth and Naomi, and of God's faithfulness in their midst was a huge part of a relook into this story for me. Ultimately, the ending in chapter 4 let me see redemption in a new light and allowed me to see in a renewed way of his care for us. For me, we are part of the story through Jesus. What a great ending, or I could say beginning. Incorporating Revelation passages at the end was so meaningful to me in renewing me and allowing the story to continue, the here but not yet, into the future.
It's good.
Yeah, I think that's some of what I saw through Ruth too. There's way more depth here than just a cute little story in the Old Testament that feels really nice. Just some of the surfacey stuff, but as we actually walk through it, there's way more depth, both in the grief and also in the redemption.
It is interesting, isn't it? It's 4 chapters, and we often, at least my perception of the book has been, it's a love story. You know, that's the way, and it's beautiful in that way. But if you were, if someone were to say, what's the story of Ruth, you could probably retell the story in a minute, but then the layers that are there, words that stand out, and the way that we see God's hand all over. I mean, a huge theme in the book is the sovereignty of God, the providence of God in all of this, how he lines up everything for the purpose of those last words, the genealogy. So
I think it's interesting too how different seasons of life, stories hit us differently. And so I don't know that I've ever felt maybe as acutely the grief of Naomi that I felt going through at this time. And I don't know that I've even ever recognized how deep her grief was. I think, Vince, you said it was a Job-like loss that she experienced. And I had never really cued in on that. And so I think just seeing it from a different perspective this time, as far as understanding her grief and maybe even being able to relate with her a little bit about feeling bitter and feeling loss and all of that. There was just a different experience of the passage for me than I've ever had before.
Vince, I like that you acknowledged that we often do view it like primarily as a love story. And I think that in itself has almost made me not be super interested in diving into Ruth. And I've also never been in a context where it's been like preached on or studied. So I've enjoyed like seeing the new layers to the story and like how it's caused me to process a lot of different things that isn't just the relationship between Ruth and Boaz, but how we see redemption in the midst of it, and also what it's taught me just to even think about grief. So I've enjoyed that.
Yeah. Thanks.
The next listener, we give it away because now there's more than one listener.
Well, the same person just submitted multiple things.
We only have one listener.
listener has 5 different takeaways.
There you go. The title of this sermon series, A Grief Redeemed, has beautifully captured the season I'm currently in. In recent years of grief, I have had at times admittedly seen myself as Naomi's bitterness and anger. But by God's grace, he has allowed me to experience him sustaining me, extended his kind and perfect provision, and given me the courage to hope as I've journeyed through the grief. While I've become acquainted and more comfortable with who he is as my sustainer and comforter, I don't think I've allowed myself to reflect and receive who he wants me to be as my redeemer in my grief. The book of grief has reminded me that being a redeemer is who God is, and that even my grief can't escape redemption. I see the progression of Naomi's journey and in her relationship with God, how he gave both spiritual riches in the forming that he does through grief, and the practical ways he chose to have mercy on Naomi by bringing things full circle. I see him working out the beauty of both these things, the spiritual riches and the practical things I'm asking him to redeem in my life, and I'm awed at who he is as he is a redeemer.
That's good.
There's a lot to think about in that one.
Yeah.
Even the progression from God as comforter to God as redeemer in the grief is, I think, pretty profound. I need to think about that one some more.
Yeah, there's something, I don't know the exact wording, but something like that God gave the spiritual blessings, even as there were moments of God giving practical, physical, revealing himself in some practical, tangible ways as well. That's helpful.
I think sometimes the idea of redemption can be difficult because we want to see the redemption now and we want to see the full scope of redemption. But even considering Naomi, like, she didn't see the full scope of redemption, and she didn't know that Obed was going to have Jesse and Jesse was going to have David. Like, she didn't know how that story was going to go. And so, I think as readers, we can understand the full scope of redemption in that Obed was part of David's line, and therefore Ruth and Naomi received redemption through that. But I think a lot of the times our redemption, we know we have to wait. We know that we don't see the full story now. We understand that God will redeem small pieces of our story here on earth, but it really won't be until we're with him that maybe we can see more fully what God was up to. And so I think sometimes for me, knowing that I won't actually know all of it makes me a little less anxious or a little less eager to seek redemption, because I'm like, I'm not really going to understand it anyway. And so maybe that's just self-protection, but I don't know.
Yeah, do you think, there's a question for us, do you think it was, do you think Ruth and Naomi experienced or felt like this was a story of redemption for them? Speculation.
I think to a certain extent they did, because, Naomi was destitute. She had no husband. She had no sons. She was living in a foreign land. And in that time, there were no options for women to provide for themselves. There were no options for survival. And so I'm sure she felt a certain degree of redemption, knowing that God had provided her Ruth, and then had provided Ruth with a husband. And so I'm certain she felt a certain degree of redemption, but it still didn't answer any of the questions of why she lost her husband and why she lost both of her sons. And so that's a grief she probably has to carry with her for the rest of her life.
What do y'all think?
Yeah, I would doubt, speculation, that Ruth would, or Naomi would say, yeah, it was worth it. It was worth you losing my husband, both my sons, for Obed. Maybe. I think that'd be a hard corner to turn, though.
I wonder if it would change if they knew where it was heading.
Yeah.
Like if they knew the genealogy that was coming. I don't know. But yeah, again.
But still a tremendous personal loss.
Yes.
For the sake of what feels like something else.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, from our perspective, it included Naomi. Like, she's blessed by it ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting at. Like, for us as the reader, we can read it. I think we often, if we're not the person in grief, we often have different eyes to see what the experiences might be. So let's say we're interacting with someone who's experienced a great amount of grief. And while it may not be caring for us to say to them, oh, just wait and watch what God's going to do here, we might see some of that. We might see some of the beauty in it, but we're on the outside because we're not experiencing that right now. So for them, I'm sure that in their own grief and pain, to see, oh, God has a plan here and that makes it all better, was probably not the case. They probably didn't experience that. For us, the reader, to zoom out and see this is where it's all heading. So it's a beautiful part of God's redemption.
Well, I mean, there's that famous John Piper quote that says something like, God is up to 10,000 things at all times, and we're aware of maybe 3 of them. And I think that is really true, that we can only see the really small pieces of what's affecting us and what's going on in our story. And I think we're also often looking for like a 1-for-1, like, oh, if this happened, that's worth it because this happened. But I think sometimes we don't actually ever learn why, because it wouldn't feel like it was enough from our perspective, from our limited point of view. I even just know, like, when at Ezra's funeral, there were, I don't know, over 1,000 people there. Almost the entire school that he went to attended, and someone told us that there was several Muslims and several Buddhists and a lot of Mormon students that came to the funeral. And they heard the gospel. And, you know, hearing that, like, that's amazing. Like, especially with some of these students that would probably never find themselves in a church or even have been exposed to the gospel. And yet still, that doesn't feel worth it, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, selfish probably. And it's a limited perspective of a mom's broken heart. But, you know, you can hear those things. And I've had, you know, people tell us after the fact how impactful that was, but that doesn't make it worth it. And so I think a lot of the times we're looking for this 1-for-1, like, this is the thing that's going to make the suffering worth it. And it's not there.
Yeah. Almost like, I'm trying to put myself in Naomi's spot. Almost like, God, you owe me to show me how you're going to use all of this in a way that makes the pain of the loss make sense, or I guess worth it is a word that you were using.
Yeah, and I don't think it will here on earth. Yeah. I just don't think it will. Yeah. And so I think a lot of the times we ask for answers or we want to understand why, but in reality we never get those answers, in part because I don't think they would actually satisfy us. I mean, I even just think about the fact when Job was questioning God and Job was pushing on God and kind of demanding that God give him answers. Like, God never answered him. His answer to Job was just to give him more of himself, like reveal more of who God was to him. And so I think there has to be a settling into understanding that we don't understand why. And I don't imagine that it would have appeased Job to understand that there was a cosmic battle going on and that God had used Job as, I don't know if it's an example to Satan, or I don't exactly know what God's reasoning was there, but that would not have probably been very comforting to Job to hear.
Yeah, like, figured out a different way, God. You took my family and livelihood and wealth.
Let me read another one. By the way, thanks to everyone who sent things in. It's good to hear how the Word of God is active. So here's another one. One thing that sticks out to me this time was from the sermon on Ruth 3. The perspective was shared about Naomi's instructions I'd not considered before, that she was telling Ruth, it's time to put off the clothes of grief and to put on the raiment of living again. I know that's not exactly how it was worded, but that's how it resonated with me. For as long as I remember, I've struggled with body image shame. That's a part of the feelings of being judged. So I choose to hide any beauty that is there instead of seeking to make things better. I also worry that any beautification would be vain and self-centered, so it's just safer to hide. But hearing this perspective shifted something in my brain. Wearing makeup and earrings, keeping my hair down, these things need not be about drawing attention to myself, but rather they can be expressions of walking out the grief, of walking as if I'm worth it. God has created me, and I am his daughter. The things I do to care for my body and shine are for his glory, signs to the world around me that I am truly living and no longer hiding. And honestly, that permission to truly live has already been shaping how I view myself. Thanks for sharing that. That's vulnerable to share.
I think it's so fascinating how God will use scripture and apply it so differently in different people's lives. Their situations are different, but the Spirit is communicating.
Yeah.
Here is another one. According to psychology today, grief is the acute pain that accompanies loss. Wikipedia defines grief as the response to the loss of something important. During the first message on the book of Ruth, the Holy Spirit stunned me by revealing to me that I have been and am living daily in grief. I didn't consciously recognize or realize the depth of that grief until that morning. My spouse is chronically ill, with no realistic earthly hope of becoming well. Now I understand that I grieve daily over the loss of my spouse's health. I grieve daily that our marriage is nowhere what it could be and should be. I'm aware that there are several other couples attending the town church in a similar situation where one spouse is chronically ill. When I see them at the town church, my heart often grieves for them as well. May the Lord bless them and keep them. The Lord make his face shine on them and be gracious to them. And may the Lord turn his face toward us and give us peace.
I appreciate that listener sharing that. And I think a real piece of healing is, I think we have to name our losses in order to grieve our losses. And so just naming the fact that their spouse will never be well and that their marriage is not what they had hoped it would be. And you have to identify those things in order to grieve those things. And I don't know, I've appreciated the book of Ruth and just understanding that there's more of a narrative of grief there than maybe I ever realized or recognized. And it's probably because I am in a season of grief that I actually see that now, or at least can relate with it more personally.
This response, I think, resonates a lot with me and where I've been recently. My mom has MS, and I think that's something that I've walked with and through and experienced my whole life. And I think especially living at home, the realities of that never felt maybe as hard, or I haven't really grieved the loss in that until recently moving away and being removed from life at home. I think I've been able to see things in a new light and have felt the freedom and ability to name what has been lost. So I think just thinking about that and how these things have come up in the midst of our time in Ruth has been really timely. And then just even, hearing the realities of the experiences of our listener, that this is a real thing that others walk through and grieve and experience. And I just think resonates a lot with me and what you were saying, Kirsten. Just being able to identify what the loss is a huge step in moving forward. And I think that's been very new for me, to be able to name what has been lost and move forward in that and process through that and recognize that there will also be more that's going to be lost. And this isn't a linear thing. But I just think that response really hit home for me.
Thanks for sharing, Betty.
Yeah, it makes me think that seems like a common human response to grief or loss is to not recognize it, right? To do the opposite for probably a whole host of reasons, which then makes me wonder, just for every human being on the face of this earth, that we are all carrying probably many losses and griefs of various degrees that we're either ready or not ready to name and to acknowledge. And it sounds like, at least from our listener and from you, Betty, that the Spirit used this book to help uncover some of that, maybe start some healing, even though I'm sure that'd be a process in that. And so I'm curious, like how he might continue to use that in our church and in people who've gone through Ruth with us and have the courage to look at loss and grief in their own life.
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out to me as I studied through the book and also have walked through our own experiences of grief, something I knew, at least in my head, I knew this. It did hit me profoundly in a different way as I studied it and walked through it slowly and also walked through it publicly with the church, was that God is not absent from any of it. And at least for me, as I read through it, often you hear that God's not absent from the things that are happening, and we can hear it as kind of like what Naomi said, it was God who brought this calamity upon me. We can often turn it in that direction. Yeah, God's not absent. Look, he's destroying me. And we could get into how we land there, but that's not how as I read and studied through the book, there was a certain comfort to me that God was doing something different in Naomi and Ruth's lives, to show them kindness, not just right then, but in an ongoing way. And he was present in all of that. And then for me, that God's not absent from the things that we're experiencing. Mm-hmm. While we may not like it or we may not understand it, he is present, and he has a much bigger story that he's writing that we may never know about. And if we do, hopefully it will change our bitterness into something beautiful. But there's a comfort to me, a certain comfort to me, to know God is present in all of this. Mm-hmm. He's writing a much bigger story than I'll ever know about. That was helpful for me.
I think too, understanding that grief is going to be a part of life, and we can't just press past it and pretend like it's not there. Like, the only way to actually deal with grief is going through it, and having a future hope doesn't necessarily lessen the grief that we experience. I was thinking about the fact that that Jesus, right before he raised Lazarus from the dead, he wept. And just thinking about, he knew what he was about to do. He knew what was going to happen. And yet he still wept at the brokenness of the world and in compassion for the people that were hurting so badly, and just seeing the effects of sin on the world. And so he had a very firsthand knowledge and ability of what he was going to do in just a few minutes in raising Lazarus from the dead. And yet he still wept. And so I think for me, that just gives a certain degree of recognizing that that grief is part of this world, and we do need to engage it, and we do need to take some time to think about those losses and grieve those things. And it's not a faithlessness. Like it's not. I think often in Christian circles, there's this idea that if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be sad because God has had the victory, and that because we have a future hope. But I think what I've recognized in my own walk and also in this story is that simply because there is a future hope doesn't mean the grief right now doesn't hurt. And so you can both grieve and have hope, and you can be deeply sad and even depressed and still have hope. And so I think both of those things can exist side by side.
Yeah, thanks for your vulnerability, Betty. I want to read one more that was sent in. The list is one a little bit shorter. So that Ruth's life is a reminder of hardships, loyalty, and beauty of God's redemption. The Word of God is so real and practical, even here in a somewhat obscure Old Testament book. That's me. That last sentence was just me. What I want to do is ask if there's any other personal takeaways that any of you have had that you haven't already shared as we interacted over some of these responses.
I think this is going to sound really simple, but it is something that I think I was reminded about week after week as I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's important to share in this book. Because throughout the book, there are a lot of what we would say, and hopefully I didn't belittle the text by saying that some of these things were weird. Some of the customs, some of the things, they're just strange. They're strange to sort
especially
through.
To us, right?
Yeah. But for the people of this day, these were common experiences, which says to me that God is present in those common experiences. He's not there's nothing I should be careful how to say that. I don't, out of my memory right now, there's nothing extraordinary in the book of Ruth. No like big miraculous things that occurred. It's normal, everyday, mundane life. We got to find food. I got to get grain. Here's the threshing floor. Here's my sandal. Here, all the stuff that's the normal everyday life. And God is present in all of that, walking them through all of that and pointing forward to something much greater. But it's in the everyday. I think we often want to see the things of God as these extraordinary, miraculous, big. Look, God was moving here. You can see it. It's right there in front of you. And also we can see it in the very simple things. So I think that was a good reminder for me as I looked at the book of Ruth and studied it week after week. It's like these are just everyday people trying to get on with life in some really hard times, in some really hard circumstances, just trying to take the next step forward, and God was there.
I mean, I think there is like this was really helpful for me in just kind of learning to understand grief and what it looks like to process through that for myself, how to care well for others in the midst of grief. But I actually was going to say something very similar to Vince, like how this also caused me to zoom out and think about how is God present in providing like the day to day. And I think the week where you really like hit on God's providence, it was really timely. And I think I shared this the other week. Like I was working on a talk that was about like give us this day our daily bread in the Lord's Prayer. And it just made me think a lot about that, of like everything, like these little things that we take for granted or that we view as we're the ones who've provided those things for ourselves. It's not the case. Like God is the one who is providing in all of life all the time, and to see like how that hits us personally, but also how he sustains this world around us. It's been really helpful for me to just think about that more, shift some perspective on that. And even as I'm working through and processing through bigger shifts and changes in life, like what does it look like to see and remember how God is present and active in all of the next steps, whether that's what I'm going to eat for dinner tonight or what am I going to be doing in the next 5 years.
What are you going to have for dinner tonight?
No clue.
Oh, God knows.
Yeah. I think a piece for me that has stuck out is just recognizing that God's grace and mercy to us is not dependent on our behavior, and it's not dependent on our performing for him. And so just thinking about the fact that like Naomi, she was bitter, she was angry with God, and yet God continued to be gracious towards her. And even just thinking like, I think sometimes there's this idea that we need to grieve well because the outside world is watching. And yet I was just thinking about the fact that Naomi was bitter and angry with God, and yet Ruth still decided to follow God. And it wasn't because necessarily of what she saw in Naomi. It was because of God's grace to her. And so, I don't know, I think it's just, for me, it's a reminder of the faithfulness of God, and that the blessings and his faithfulness to us is not dependent on our behavior. It's not dependent on our faithfulness to him. It's just because it is who he is.
Yeah, there had to have been something there that Ruth saw in Naomi, or saw in God, that Naomi has just lost her husband and 2 sons, and Ruth says, I'm going with you. your God will be my God and your people, my people. That, if I followed after somebody and they had just lost everything that was of meaning to them, I think I would say, what do I need to do to stay as far away from that as I can? But there was something there visible for her to say that's what I want. Whether it was Naomi's faithfulness or just God's initiative on her own heart to do that.
And then she becomes, what do the texts say, more dear to her than 7 sons?
Yeah.
That Ruth becomes more dear to Naomi than 7 sons.
Yeah.
Here's the last thought before I ask the last question. So so the Redeemer who's in the first place, like what's his face, right? The friend that's unnamed.
Yeah.
Betty, as you were talking, you're describing how God's intimately involved in our lives, even the mundane stuff. But he's also intimately involved not only in the lives of the stories of the people that we have throughout the Bible, who the Messiah and the Redeemer comes from, but even like that first Redeemer who then walks off and we hear nothing more of him.
Right.
Like God is still intimately involved in what's-his-face's life that we don't have the story for. We don't know how that went. But we only have the stories of like the line of the Redeemer.
Yeah.
But for us today, he's as intimately involved with us as well. So like it just broadens it out, I think. So like Orpah, she goes back to Moab.
Yeah.
Hear nothing else about her.
Yeah.
We can make a bunch of assumptions, but God is still just as present there in Moab. Now his presence is felt perhaps in a different way. He may be active in different ways. There's different sensitivities, like all of that, but he's still sovereign over all of it.
Yeah.
No finished thought. That's it. All right. We're going to go to the last question. Let's look at the entire book of Ruth. And we probably have already talked about some of this, but where do you see God's glory? Like, what is God like according to the book of Ruth?
He's a redeemer. I mean, he can take our deepest heartache and bring beauty from it. And we may not see it this side of heaven, but it's just who he is. Like, you can't escape his redemption. And so if there are pieces of your story that are wrecked and destroyed right now, like God will bring redemption to that. We can't anticipate what that will look like, but we can anticipate that it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've already mentioned a couple things. The thing that immediately stands out is that he is involved and invested in everything and all the stuff, all the places of life where we're existing. He is present, and there's a plan. And we may not know it or like it, but there's a plan.
I need to share before Vince more because that's what I was going to say. But yeah, just seeing that he is present in all of life all the time. And I don't think I ever have had such a clear grasp of how true that is until recently. Like maybe not just as we've been going through Ruth, but the last few years of life. I think it's been such like a concentrated and hard time of really understanding God more and understanding myself more. And I think that's something that's come up so much in it, of how present and real he is in all of the things of life, and just walking in that through these last couple of years and then seeing that come to life in Ruth has been really cool.
I got nothing to add. We've got a Redeemer who's intimately involved. Praise God for that. It's a good God.
Yeah.
All right, this Sunday.
1 Corinthians.
Here we go.
Here we go.
It's going to be a ride.
It is. It's going to be good. I'd encourage you to be reading it. Reading, rereading, taking notes. We'll have the journals again. This time we have some special ones that are spiral bound, so they're easy to like flip over. But I'd encourage you to be reading, rereading, writing down questions, writing down notes. What is God doing? What is God communicating to us through this? It's a letter Paul has written to the church, a pretty messed up church. Could even be kind of like our church because we're pretty messed up as well, or at least I am.
We've got a lot to work through together as a church through this letter.
Yep, it's gonna be good.
Yep. So stick with us. And how do I sign off again?
Over and out. Good,
Over
buddy.
and out. Yeah. We'll see you. Thanks for listening.